Here he is again. This time he's talking about what happened in 2014. I hope Mrs. Newland is listening. But listen, this was not the first coup. And how did Yushchenko come to power in Ukraine? What? As a result of legitimate elections. Do you want me to show you how he came to power? We know that they came up with a third round of voting. What bloody third round? It's not provided by the Constitution. This was a coup. But at least it was passed in a relatively peaceful way, and we communicated with them. I went there. They came to us. No, it came to a bloody coup d'etat. It has become obvious that we are not given any chance to build normal relations with our neighbors and with the fraternal Ukrainian people. That's pretty candid, Colonel.
You know, I think he's telling the truth. Remember, when he first went in there, he went in with some assumptions that turned out to be fundamentally invalid, the most important of which was that someone in the West was willing to talk to him. There never was anyone.
Right.
And when the discussions got off the ground with the Ukrainians, as soon as there was a hint from Zelensky and his representatives that there could be some sort of agreement, what happened? The rug was pulled out from underneath the whole thing. Washington does not want an agreement. Washington's goal remains unchanged. The problem is Washington's goal of destroying Russia, ruining its economy, demoralizing its population, creating unrest, et cetera, has all failed. It's hopeless. It's not working. Washington is losing dramatically. That's unambiguously clear. So Putin is saying, look, we're going to see what's left, determine what is there, and then if we think it's time, we'll move, and I'll let you know my decision. I think that just means he's going to sweep north and then eventually over to Odessa. He's going to take what he said he would. He's going to seize the cities and the territory that is historically Russian. I don't think he wants to go much further, but if pushed, he will.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to ask the Colonel, does Joe Biden really expect Ukraine to be in NATO? And what about the nukes that are in Belarus? Right after this.
You want to feel safe in your vehicle. And for you, that means easy, rapid access to your firearm. But safety also means your items don't fall into the wrong hands. You don't have to choose between safety and convenience. The headrest safe keeps your firearm where you can access it, and no one else can. Just order your headrest safe. Install it yourself when it arrives, and enjoy peace of mind. It starts at theheadrestsafe.com.
Here's President Lukashenko, Colonel, just yesterday talking about nukes and the strength of them. Again, I'll be reading the subtitles. Belarus's Lukashenko said they've started taking delivery of Russian tactical nuclear weapons. Quote, we have missiles and bombs that we have received from Russia, 3 times more powerful than those dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There, more than 80,000 people died instantly, 250,000 overall. That's from one strike, and this one is 3 times more powerful. I don't know, up to 1 million people would die immediately if, God forbid, we used this weapon. The storage of nuclear weaponry is all over. We have lots of storage facilities. We really have a lot of them. We have already restored 5 or 6 of them, and we will restore more. We will spread them out. We won't keep it all in one place. Okay, is this to be believed? Has President Putin shipped nuclear weaponry 3 times as powerful as what President Truman dropped in 1945 into Belarus?
Well, I once asked a French officer who had participated in the development of the French nuclear force, said, how many nuclear warheads do you think we really need? And he immediately said, 1. And I said, what do you mean 1? He said, it's so terrible. That's really all you need. He said, I don't know why people keep building these arsenals and making them larger, because no one in their right mind would use it. I think that's the message from Lukashenko. Now, Lukashenko was a target for regime change. We did go in there, this is about a year ago, and try to stimulate revolutionary forces to remove him. It didn't work. And I think he's been very concerned about the potential for Lithuania in particular, perhaps Latvia, both to sponsor or provide assembly areas for NATO forces along with their own to move into Belarus. Remember, there are only about 8 million people that live in Belarus. I mean, it's a large area, but there aren't very many people in it. And I think Putin finally agreed, all right, we'll put some tactical nuclear weapons forward to make it clear that, you have access to these things, to reassure him. Remember, we have tactical nuclear weapons on the ground in Germany. We have them at sea in the naval forces, surface and submarine. We have them in Italy. We have them in Turkey. So it's not as though this is a startling development.
Wasn't there to have been, or weren't we to have expected, or didn't we anticipate a coup in Belarus a few weeks ago that was allegedly going to be supported by Polish troops?
Well, I don't know if there was one expected a few weeks ago. We've been working on it off and on. This National Endowment for Democracy and our intelligence services. It's all failed. There's no chance of that succeeding in Belarus. I think they've got their eye on Serbia at this point. But the bottom line is that this is unfortunate, but it was inevitable given our demonstrated intentions. Now, the good news is that Putin is not talking about using them, and I don't see any evidence that he would unless we attacked him with nuclear weapons. That's pretty clear.
Is it realistic what he said, that they have a weapon 3 times more powerful than Nagasaki or Hiroshima?
Well, again, it's the quality of the warhead. It's eminently possible. I don't know the tonnage. Normally, a low-yield nuclear warhead is below 5 kilotons. That's still an enormous detonation.
I mentioned the polls. Do you detect any loss of enthusiasm from Polish leadership, which a few months ago was talking about introducing troops on the ground in Ukraine?
Yeah, well, quite recently, the Polish president told everyone, the Ukrainians are losing hundreds of men every day. The Russian steamroller is crushing Ukraine. Now, he's never said anything like that previously. The one Pole who has spoken about that honestly in the past is the Polish chief of staff, the 4-star. And he was the one that pointed out, don't believe this nonsense that the Russians are not competent. The Russian soldiers are excellent. They're well trained. And Ukraine is not winning. But now we have it from the president of Poland. I hope that dampens any enthusiasm for moving into Western Ukraine, which I think would be very dangerous.
Will it dampen any enthusiasm amongst President Biden or Chancellor Scholz or the Prime Minister of Great Britain to push for Ukraine's? It's hard for me even to articulate this, but I have to ask you because this is the stuff we're reading. Ukraine's entry into NATO?
Listen, I think it's very important that we discuss this. The New York Times carried a story this morning saying that there was a groundswell of support to bring Ukraine in quickly.
Ooh.
Now, if you were looking once again for evidence that Ukraine is on the verge of collapse, this is excellent evidence. Stop and consider this for a minute. Why would you now want to rush something that months ago you said could not occur for years? Remember, the standard position was, well, we weren't going to bring in Ukraine immediately anyway because they're not ready. That was the argument last year. Now suddenly we have to bring in Ukraine. Why? Well, I think the reason is very clear. We're losing. Our position is eroding in Ukraine. The Ukrainian army is being devastated, exactly what the president of Poland said. This, of course, is what President Orban in Hungary warned would happen. It's happened. So if you know that you're losing and you don't want to admit that you've lost, if you're trying to regain face, in other words, recover somehow or another publicly, unfortunately, there is a tendency historically to widen the war. Make it worse. How do you do that? Bring in Ukraine. And the globalist allies in Berlin and other capitals in Western Europe in particular are all cheering this on because they're in the same boat as Biden. They're very much at risk of losing their positions in government across Europe. And this can be done without consulting the electorates. In other words, you just declare war over the head or over the heads of the people that elected you to power. Suddenly, we're at war now.
Can it be done over the resistance of Viktor Orban, the president of Hungary, the one Western European leader who gets it?
I would think not, simply because under the treaty, he has veto power. All it takes is one member that says, no, I'm not going to support this. But we've seen so many things happen that are unprecedented, so many things, frankly, that violate our own United States Constitution on a routine basis. I mean, we also see a lot of evidence now, it's being published, that they want to recall pilots, experienced pilots from the Air Force and the Navy to come back in and fly. They're offering them bonuses. But as part of this, they've also been told there's a private firm that may be willing to hire you to fly for Ukraine. In other words, we're talking something like the Flying Tigers emerging for Ukraine. I mean, this is lunacy. This will bring us into war with Russia as well. This is not 1936.
This is also unconstitutional. Only the Congress can do this, but that's never stopped this president or his predecessors in the past. Last question for you. Do you think that Putin will stop the military activity once Odessa is seized and sort of take stock with, well, here we are. Do you really want us to go forward anymore?
I think he's predisposed to do that because from the very beginning, everything he's done has been very deliberate and very measured. I thought when he went in to begin with that he would spare nothing and make his point early that, Russia is going to devastate you. We're not going to put up with anything. I was wrong. He went in with a small force. It was very incremental. And he persisted with this negotiate and fight business until it became clear there was no hope for it. But I still think that what he wants to do is avoid a collision with NATO. That's why he has troops in Belarus. That's not just these tactical nuclear weapons, but he has forces there. He has air defense forces there. He has artillery forces there, so that people in NATO know if you move into Western Poland, you will be at risk of attack from the north, from Belarus. It's also a guarantee that if he crosses the river, and I think he will eventually, and take Odessa, there's a force up in Belarus that will attack into the rear of any NATO force that tries to rush in and prevent Odessa from falling into his hands. Remember, Odessa is not very far from Romania. We have forces in Romania, and now we seem to have persuaded the government of Moldova to let us move through the country. That is NATO forces at will. So, he's got to look at all of these possibilities. And remember, the last time we talked about Prigozhin, who mentioned the need for national mobilization.
Right.
In the speech that he gave, he pointed to the acquisition of new troops. If his numbers are right, and I think they probably are, they're at about 700 to 750,000 committed to the West. In other words, to Ukraine for potential use there. But if he is pushed, and we will not negotiate any sort of settlement, then he will have to go larger. He will have to have a larger force. He'll have to commit to a longer campaign. He's got enough ammunition, I'm told right now, for 2 years. So that's a lot of time, but I think he would probably add more to the force, and then he would go all the way to the Polish border, which is the exact opposite of what we said we wanted to happen when this began.
Right. How much longer do you think the military activity will go on before the Ukrainians realize this can't go on anymore?
I think the Ukrainians are already there. Morale is in the gutter. And I think they're running out of people that they can willfully, commit. One wonders why no one yet in these capitals in the Western world and in Washington have not been brought up on charges of murder. Because if you look at the losses that are being taken today in Ukraine, it's inconceivable to me. I mean, from the moment that you cross the start line that you have no chance of success. Right. Now, there's a certain amount of bravery here and courage. I believe that, but I also know there are a lot of people being forced to do this. But the whole thing is just murder at this stage. The Ukrainians are going to push the Russians out of Ukraine where they are. It's not going to happen. But we refuse to accept that because, again, as we started this discussion, Washington doesn't want to admit it's failed. It doesn't want to admit it was wrong. Absolutely not. And the danger is, if nothing else works, you widen the war. And that's what we have to look for now from Washington.